Hey, everybody, and welcome to #ActorLife. I'm your host, John Rosenfeld. Today, I'm thrilled to be chatting with a dear friend, someone I've had the privilege of watching grow and evolve over the past 15 years. He's an incredibly talented actor, gifted writer, and a kick-ass producer who knows this industry inside and out. His movie, Pretty Problems, which he co-wrote and produced and starred in, and cast several other amazing JRS actors, well, it crushed, winning the Audience Award at South by Southwest in 2022 and the Grand Jury Prize at Sonoma, with director Kestrin Pantera named Bay Area Filmmaker of the Year. Please enjoy Michael Tennant. I'm very excited to have you on. This is great.
I'm very excited to be here, John. I know we've been dancing around this, and here we are in the ring.
Dancing around.
Ready to go
You
15
actually
rounds.
were in my first tool shop.
I was in the very first tool
That was
shop.
that was 15 years ago.
Yeah. I was actually just doing the math in my head. I've been in Los Angeles for 17 years.
17?
Yeah. I've lived here longer than I lived in
Do you remember who was in that class? Kim Shaw.
Kim Shaw was. Otherwise, a bunch of people that I remember being like, do I want to be an actor? No.
Hey.
But no, yeah, I mean, you and I met because Clayton Froning, who is, a member of the studio here and one of my dearest friends on the planet, had worked with you, and I was looking for an acting class, and I used to live right across the street from the studio, and I was like, well, this just kind of fell into my lap. So we were still figuring it out. We were we were at your house. We were kind of like still trying to find spaces.
Oh, we were at that commercial.
Yeah.
That's no longer exists.
Yes.
On Purdue, like on the west side.
Yes.
A lovely casting facility.
Yes.
We can, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like my first real memories though of JRS are that Monday night group after Tool Shop.
That's right, Monday night.
Yeah, with it was Britt, Dewan, Chloe, Chris was our TA, who I'm actually having coffee.
Wait, who's Chris?
Chris O'Donnell, but
Chris Doherty.
Yeah,
Chris
O'Donnell.
O'Donnell.
He's got 37
Why
names.
does he have two last names?
Well, because there's a country singer named Chris Doherty, and there's a Chris O'Donnell that was on a hit show called NCIS. It's hard out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hard out there for O'Donnell.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, gosh, I'd been out of acting class for probably 6 years because I was in New York for about 4 years, and things were going well there. To the point where I kept coming out here to test, and I kept coming out here to audition. And I'm from Southern California. I was like, why am I living in New York? I live in an apartment that I can barely afford. That's the size of a shoebox. And why don't I go back to California, see the sun again? Winters in New York were cute the first time because I had to wear a scarf and a pea coat and smoke a cigarette and feel cool about myself.
And you're from Arizona.
I'm actually from San Diego.
Oh, from San Diego.
Yeah, so the common misconception.
You really don't. Do winter.
Anything below 75, I just seasonal depression. Like yesterday was a tough day for me here in Los Angeles. Yeah. I got back into class because I was feeling, I was just feeling kind of lost. I felt like I was doing the bartender actor thing, and I remember first getting into class with you, though, and God, I hated it. And it wasn't you. It was just I realized that I was so out of shape as an actor. I think I called you for the second class I took with you, and I just was like, you don't like me, and you don't like my acting, and I feel like the worst actor on the planet. And you were like, okay, so what's going on with you right now in your personal life? I was like, well, I just broke up with my long-term girlfriend, and my parents are getting divorced, and oh, I'm in chaos. And we had this, I think that was really the beginning of a beautiful friendship with you and I, of one, open communication, but two, it was when I started to realize that my life as a creative was so built upon my personal life, and the things that I was not dealing with and struggling with in my personal life were showing up in my work. And I think it was very easy to take that energy and throw it onto you or throw it onto anyone, and not turn the mirror back on myself and wonder, why am I feeling like this?
I mean, obviously, I've been doing this a long time, and you watch an event like that happen, and you truly never know how a person's going to respond. Either they're going to be like, fuck it, I'm out.
Mm-hmm.
Or they get curious by it. And I remember that I was like, I don't know which way he's going to react. He might go away and I'll never see him again, or he's going to return. You're willing to look in a mirror, you know what I mean? And you do it verbally, you do it, but you're willing to do it, which is really always, I think, been your biggest pattern, or that's kind of your MO, was being willing to take an inventory of how am I operate, how am I functioning? I got to encounter it, which is something I think I wish for everyone.
I'm really competitive. like I grew up playing sports. I went to university to play baseball and I got injured, and I'd always wanted to be an actor. I did plays in high school because I went to a high school where you had to do some type of art, and I was a terrible painter. I couldn't dance, I couldn't sing, and there were a lot of really cute girls that were doing the plays, and so it was a really fun way to spend afternoons.
Oh God, you're a
Um,
cliche.
I am a really bad cliche.
Yeah.
Um, and I got that first laugh doing a production of Brighton Beach Memoirs, and I was just like, whoa. I had this amazing professor in university after I got hurt. I was taking an intro to acting class, and he showed up at my dorm, and he was actually the head of the theater program. He happened to be teaching my class because he was about to go on sabbatical for a year with his wife to go do theater in France. He showed up with all these Paul Newman VHS cassette tapes because that's how old I am, and he was like, "I really think you should do this. I really think you should pursue this thing." And I dove into it, and then I unfortunately carried that competitiveness into acting.
Mm.
It's something I've talked about where I don't think actors should be competitive with one another. It's a thing where we're all on different journeys and we're all in different lanes, but there is also a thing where you have to learn from the people you're around. Like I remember being in class with people, Stephen, Blake, and Randall, and be like, what are these guys doing that I'm not doing? Like it's like they're going to therapy, they're coaching all the time, they're going to class, they're putting themselves out there, and it's like, what are you doing? I'm not. I'm not doing these things. I am just waiting for someone to show up and hand me the life I want, and I'm not doing the work to actually build this life for myself. Um, and again, like, I don't think I mean, my company is called My Therapist Thinks Productions, and that's because you introduced me to the beauty of therapy.
It's interesting looking at you now, 15 years, the journey you've taken, and fast forwarding to today, and then we can go back.
Sure.
You starred in and wrote and produced a film called Pretty Problems.
I did
which,
those things.
Ended up winning the jury award at South by Southwest.
Won the audience award at South by, and then I might know all the other festivals it won.
And a million festivals, yeah, but I might know. No, but you did that, but it was and you had produced before. That wasn't like
Sure.
the first thing you produced. That was such a remarkable achievement. You sat down and you wrote that freaking thing. But to get to that place, it required a lot of like surrendering certain things beforehand. It was going, okay, wait a second. Sometimes comparison leads to paralysis, it leads to so much paralysis. I was that way too. Like I would, it was really unhealthy. Even when I remember coaching people in my early 30s, and they would book a pilot or book a show and be rich. And I was like, I gave them those. I mean, it's really not healthy when you're a coach and going, I can't believe you got that. I was so right for it. And then, thank God, eventually when I started to make that my career, I was like, oh, no. And then it just became a selfless, like, this is just like, I'm just so excited.
Well, it's your gift, it's your superpower, and it's a thing, but you had to admit that.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah. I'll say, what actually happened? I'll never forget this. My best friend, Todd. Hi, Todd.
Hi,
Love
Todd.
You. Hi, Todd.
Thank you for returning my email.
Todd Grinnell booked a show in 2005. It was a pilot called Four Kings. It was just like the dream. And back in 2005, an NBC show, making good money, going to all the parties. And back then, the way networks treated you were just like, come to New York, swag, all that stuff. And I remember feeling so much envy. And I hated myself for the feelings I was having about him. And I needed to tell him. And I told him, I hate that I'm feeling this. I'm jealous. And I just need to be honest with you. And like, I got a little teary-eyed, but I'm so sorry, but I'm feeling this way. And he was so compassionate and empathic. He's like, I get it, man. I get it. But somehow that put it away. But it's just very weird when you're like, your best friend, I was like, I should feel only happy for you. But I was actually making it about me. And I needed to really own it and admit it. And I feel like I was really kind of like the birth of a new me, just being able to talk about it. And then it kind of went away. But so for you, I would love to hear like when it was like, we're talking like Steven Kruger and Randall Park. And was it Teddy Searson? No, that was not Teddy.
I was just after Teddy, but Teddy and I've met Teddy a handful of times. Yeah. I've taken headshots with Teddy's photographer and his pictures on the wall. And you're like, well, my picture's not going to look like that.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
there's all this like comparison, that
Yeah.
paralysis. So how did you work your way out of it? To lead, I want to get.
It's,
Eventually, I
you know
really
what,
want to talk
honestly, it's
about
kind of what you
producing.
just said, though, actually. It's because, John Beavers is a really dear friend of mine who's just having, John booked a role on, I'm blanking on the name of
Years ago.
this years ago. John booked something, and it was the first time where I didn't have a tinge of that, oh, when somebody booked something. I remember John booked this part, and I was like, fuck yes, John Beavers. Like, this guy works his ass off. He's a good human being. Like, I am so thrilled. And I remember the feeling of like, whoa, I could feel like this all the time. I could have gratitude for my friend's success.
Mhm.
I don't need to be living in comparison because John and I are not the same actor. John and I are not the same person. I can just support my friends here. And I love film and I love television and I specifically love indie film. And I fell into producing because I was doing a couple days on a movie with 2 Academy Award winners whose names I won't use, and one of them was really rude to me. And I think a producer felt bad for me, so he had lunch with me. And
I haven't seen them as much lately on film, by the way.
yeah, no,
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 no.
no.
I think karmically something happened.
You know,
And one has continued to work quite frequently.
quite frequently.
Yeah, won quite a lot of
They
awards.
were lovely, by the way.
And they were lovely, yeah.
But anyway, so this producer and I happened to like the same random '90s movie, indie movie, Door in the Floor, this Jeff Bridges movie that's based on John Irving's widow for 1 year, and we just kind of bonded over this, and then he ended up. I had lunch with him, and he brought me in to do development work. And as an actor, I was like, "This is an amazing job. All I'm doing is reading scripts."
Which company was this?
It's now defunct, but it's Route One Entertainment.
Okay.
I was just reading scripts, giving notes, and
Was it a paid job?
it ran. It paid. I had insurance. I was.
Oh, wow.
I was about to get married. As an actor, it was awesome.
Okay.
And I was like, this is great, and I just can read scripts and do this. What happened was, as we started making movies, and we made 7, 8 movies. I just watched the sausage get made so many times, and I watched these conversations that, as an actor, I was always afraid were happening, about the reasons certain people are getting roles, about the way that producers' brains are working. And producer is such an interesting term because it can mean a lot of things, and I think people throw it around like, and I think people have an idea of a producer, and I've worked on 10, 12 movies, and my job has been different on almost every single movie. So I watched these movies getting made, and it kind of broke my heart to watch people make movies because they wanted to pull fees. They didn't really care about what the movie was going to end up looking like. They didn't really care about. They wanted to go to Sundance, but they wanted to go to Sundance because they wanted to go to Sundance. They didn't want their movie to play at Sundance. They wanted to be on set with movie stars. They wanted to eat sushi, and they wanted to drive a German car. And I love sushi, and I drive a Volvo, but I care about storytelling. And I think it's one of the things that's always held me back as an actor. And it's like, look, I booked pilots that haven't gotten picked up, and that's awesome. And like, you get to pay down some of your debt, but if the pilot doesn't get picked up, it's actually not the life-changing experience I think it's going to be a lot of the time. And I would take those defeats and I would live in the defeat. I would live in the sadness of it. And I just got to a place as a producer where I was like, I love this thing. I watch so many movies. I read so many scripts, and through you do this wonderful exercise in class where you have actors write for each other.
Right.
And it was the only time I'd ever written before. And I remember writing a scene for our friend Nicole Dalton in class, and we finished reading it, and everybody was like, "Whoa, Tennant, what? Whoa!" And I was like, "Wait, am I good at this?" I sat down to write Pretty Problems because I was frustrated. Because I was really frustrated with the movies that I was seeing get made, with how they were getting made. I was also frustrated because I had these amazing friends who I knew were so talented, who no one was, giving a quote unquote break to or a shot to. And these are all working actors. These are all people that book. But, you fight like hell to play angry cop number 2, and you're working with these people, and you're like, Britt specifically, who just.
Britt Rentschler, teacher.
Yes.
JRS.
Who's my work wife. She's just one of the most talented human beings I've ever met. She's one of the smartest people I've ever met. And when I sat down to write this thing, and look, spoiler, my marriage wasn't going great at this moment. So I sat down to write a comedy about class and about relationships.
Wait, what year did you start writing it?
2019.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember, was it the beginning of the year or because you were pretty close to completion before.
No, you know what? Actually, I'm sorry. It was end of 2018.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah, it was end of
then you would have only
2018.
written in like 5 months. Yeah.
But honestly, like I wrote the script pretty fast.
Okay.
And then, so yeah, I wrote the script in end of 2018 and 2019. We geared up fall winter of 2019 to start shooting in April of 2020, and then the pandemic happened.
Yeah.
Um,
Which ended up actually being a great thing for the
amazing
movie.
thing for the movie. We workshopped some of the scenes actually on Zoom during the pandemic when we were like, we don't have any material, and you were gracious enough to let me, you know, hear actors who weren't the actors I'd cast read it, which really helped craft some of the story. But yeah, we almost, the movie is all set at one location up in wine country, and the people that own that house were really big fans of my work, and they, I asked if I could shoot something there because I'd been to the house and it was crazy beautiful and it had weird art, and I just thought I could tell a really interesting story there. And this goes back to the competitive piece of what I was saying earlier of I did a lot of research gearing up. I was like, why do certain indie films work and why do certain other indie films not work? And what it really boils down to in my mind is story and character.
Okay.
I do. That's not to say that there aren't movies you watch where you're like, oh my god, the camera work, oh my god, like this, oh my, the twist,
No,
whatever.
sure.
But for me, it's relationships, and it's just, do I see myself in this world? And I was really intentional, and this is when I brought Britt on about making a two-hander where I want it to be gray. I want. It really meant a lot to me when we were touring with that movie. The jokes there were certain jokes that killed in San Francisco that did not get laughs in Alabama. At the same time, there were like jokes in Alabama that killed that did not get laughs in Maui.
Right.
I was trying to make something where I was okay if some people sided with her character and some people sided with my character. I didn't want a, in quotations, protagonist. I didn't want nice people. I wanted real people. Um, and then I cast a bunch of my friends from this studio who, I just thought weren't getting the attention they deserved, and who I knew were going to show up for me because they weren't going to big time me. I'd been on so many movies where, you watch actors that were on hiatus from television shows and they're stoked to be there, but they're just not really used to making an indie movie is like going to summer camp. Yeah. It really is. Like you don't know how it's going to go. You don't know who you're going to be friends with. You don't know.
Well, I would love you to go into that
Yeah.
because I think for everyone out there, when we talk about producing, you talk about getting names. I just look at it like you look at Adam Sandler.
Yeah.
He casts his people.
Yeah.
Like always his people. I think of like David Wayne, casts his people.
Yep.
And if they are going to bring a new person on board, they know what they're going to get from that person. And anyone who's going to come on board is going to come ready to fuck it. They're ready to rip.
Yeah.
When you were going about Pretty Problems, I remember I had a friend who's a producer call me up, and he had a script that I really liked, but he was lamenting that they had hired a name. It was a picture we had actually worked in class, and people killed it in class.
Yeah.
But he lamented that he got this name. Obviously, I'm not going to say who. And there was like a 6-page, like almost like monologue that is really should wow the audience.
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, it was Jeanette who killed it.
Shocker.
I mean, not a shocker at all.
Yeah.
Jeanette, who's no longer with us. We love you, Jeanette.
11-11, girl.
He said the actors who they got just didn't know it.
Yep.
Just didn't know it. They couldn't. They had to do so much editing, which was the opposite of what they wanted. They didn't want to do it on one take. That was the whole bit. That's what sucks you into the movie.
Yeah.
And they never got it.
Yeah.
And they gave her a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I'm betting and I know all the actors, Graham Outerbridge, brilliant, right?
I mean,
Brittany
he
Rensselaer.
loved working on that movie so much he quit the industry right
Yeah,
after
he did.
But yeah.
Well, at least he went out on a bang.
He did.
He's an attorney
Yes,
now,
no, he was
so
having,
he's
having
doing
a
good
baby,
things.
but he's a working attorney.
But everybody, I bet everybody came off book, ready to go, ready to play, right? Yeah. That's what I think people sometimes need to hear. It's like, yeah, sometimes getting that, like, that name is not always in service to the film.
I've also, look, just to be perfectly honest, I've told you the story a bunch, but the first movie.
They don't know it. You don't have to tell them that.
I've never told this story to anyone ever. Can we take that back? Just hit 15 seconds back on your podcast. Never told this story to anyone before, John.
Okay, thank you.
The first movie I produced, Allison Janney was in it, and it was the greatest acting class I've ever taken that wasn't at JRS.
Right.
It was 3 weeks of watching this.
Well, Allison Janney is going to come prepared.
Goddess.
A goddess, yeah.
And watching just the way she attacked the role, I it was basically like if you told her the scene is red, she would give you every shade of red possible because she's a really smart actor, and she knows that the editor is going to be able to come in and make this into a really beautiful performance. It was also, I have her on such a pedestal, and she would come in and she'd rehearse and she'd be perfect, she'd be amazing, and the camera would start rolling, and she would just have the take.
Yeah.
And it was like, whoa, that was weird. And she's like, all right, got that out of my system, go. And she would do that pretty consistently. And it's like, oh my God, she's identifying that, like, these are my bad habits. These are the things that I like. These are the traps that I see in the scene. I'm going to just play them all. I'm going to get it out of my system. And then I'm ready to hear it. And I'm ready to work. With Pretty Problems, I have 3 rules on set, which is best idea wins, always be rolling, meaning just make sure the camera is always getting something. So we always have something to cut to. We always want extra footage. We always,
Right.
and don't be an asshole.
Right.
And I brought people that I weren't, I brought people who I knew were not going to
Graham
be
Atterbridge was an asshole, wasn't he?
You're such an asshole.
He was
Graham
always an
Atterbridge.
asshole.
You're
Graham.
such an asshole.
Nicest person ever.
No, God, I love him. He's the godfather of my unborn children.
Yes.
That it was also, again, I knew these were people that were not going to let me fail, and
Yeah.
I knew that I was not going to fail these people. I knew these people were going to make, I think about 85% of what I wrote made it into the movie. And the other 15-20% is letting the Tom DeChernises of the world. It's letting the Alex Kleins. It's letting the Charlotte Ubbins. It's letting these people just cook.
Yeah.
Because they're going to find
JJ Nolan.
Yeah, God, JJ. She's terrifying. I love her. But yeah, JJ. I mean, JJ wasn't meant to play that part. JJ was meant to play the part Charlotte ended up playing. And then after we read JJ for Charlotte for that part, Charlotte was like, "Screw that! I'm playing that part." And I was like, well, we already cast JJ. What am I supposed to do with JJ?
Yeah.
So we got, Kestrin Pantera, the director, and I talked, and she was like, what if we offer JJ that part? And I was like, all right, let's offer JJ the part. And thank God we did. She landed the plane every time.
Oh my God. I remember having JJ in class. You'd watch over her. Her brain goes in a million miles. Just a million miles.
She's one of the funniest human beings on the
people.
planet.
But she's funny just sitting there doing nothing. She's just like, it's just JJ.
Yeah. I mean, you're having a good day when the sound guy's laughing.
Yeah.
And JJ had the sound guy in stitches the entire time. She had me in stitches.
But I think, one of the things I would love you to talk about is that we are in do you know we're in 2025?
Every day, John.
And we're in 2025.
Every day.
Producing now, producing, I think you clearly are, you're clearly writing and wanting to produce your own material.
Mm-hmm.
And of course so you actually are much more educated and learned in the world of producing.
Sure.
Today, in today's world, I'll just tell you a quick thing, and you tell me. I'd love just to hear feedback. I was talking to a showrunner the other day, and they were saying that a lot of these studios are really cutting back some of their features, largely because they don't know how to monetize right now. They haven't figured out a way to actually make money. So there's one particular studio, I don't want to get anyone in trouble, but like last year they had 10 films going. Now they have 1. And like the president's gone and someone else took their place, so there's also trimming happening. So I'm wondering just tell me about the producing and the hardships or what is it like? What is it? Like you said, how the sausage gets made, right? So like, what are some of the initial steps that one even has to begin to do?
The first thing I'm going to say to that is I know nothing because none of us know anything. Like it really is. I wish there was a formula. I wish there was a book. I wish there was a plan. There is no plan.
So this is similar just to an acting career.
It is not linear, man. And like I do think I've been able to take a lot of what I've learned as an actor and apply it to producing.
Okay.
I do think it's one of the things that has benefited me as a producer is that I read things like an actor.
Right.
Look, the first piece of advice I got when I started producing was you need 3 things to make a movie. You need a script, you need the money, and you need talent, meaning an actor.
Okay.
If you have 2 of these 3 things, it's very easy to get the third thing. If you have 1 of these 3 things, it's very hard to get the other 2 things. Okay. Right? There are a lot of scripts out there. There is less money than there used to be, but I still believe there is money out there. The thing that has happened with indie films specifically and with I mean, look, you're even seeing it at the studio level. You just said this. With indie film, it's becoming a little bit like the opera, in my opinion. It is relying on patron saints. We need people that like movies like this. We need, I think it's great that, I think it's great Anora just had the run it did. I completely agree with Sean Baker that storytelling wins and like trust filmmakers.
How did Honora do?
Financially?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it did 30, 40 million box office.
How much did it cost to make?
6.
Okay.
And that's before P&A. Obviously, that's the advertising that you spend to make sure people know your movie exists. But also, Sean was nominated for Florida Project. Sean, I loved Red Rocket, which didn't do well, which was a bomb actually financially. I do think you're seeing. We're gonna get off topic a little bit here, but it's like the Oscars this year was a little bit of a rebuff of studio features. A lot of the movies that people were talking about were made by indie studios, but they were essentially indie movies. I think what's happened is these studios have gotten so big, and they're owned by parent companies, and you even saw it with the CAAs and the UTAs, where private equity money comes in, and these agencies are all of a sudden being bought to turn a profit, and then all of a sudden the people that have invested to buy these companies are realizing that these aren't as profitable as they thought they were. So things start getting monetized down to, I mean, when we sold Pretty Problems to IFC, shout out to IFC, love you forever. We were talking about turning it into a TV show.
Right.
It's almost like, how do you monetize anything into IP? And my experience prior to Pretty Problems was, I worked with these guys for a while at National Lampoon, and it was 2 years of changing directions midstream. Where all of a sudden it was like, we're going to build a cinematic universe around National Lampoon, and it was like, how are we going to do that? Right. It's like this worked for Marvel, and we can't, like, Marvel has, granted, National Lampoon has years of of publications, but they aren't tied together. And so we're going to be trying to stitch these together. And I think people think audiences are stupid. I don't think they trust that audiences can pick up on subtlety. That's not to say that, like, look, I came home from class last night with you, and I flipped on something that was dumb and that I could just watch in the background while I was messing around on my phone and while I was doing a little bit of writing. It's like there is a certain type of entertainment we enjoy that's calming, soothing. For the most part, I think it's why you're seeing a lot of the Marvel movies struggle recently.
I really did love The Avengers, like that first one,
Mm-hmm.
right? That was a great movie. But I also remember having a thought, because I remember when they were creating this whole world, I was like, I had a very distinct, I'll never forget having this very distinct thought of like, this is going to age. This is definitely, people are going to get tired of these. They're going to keep on making these. And I was wondering when it was going to happen. Because especially by like the second Iron Man, I'm like, okay. I mean, who doesn't love Robert Downey Jr.? But like, it's not about that. It's just like the whole idea of this world. And then I remember when it was like Avengers. What was that last one?
Endgame.
It was.
Yeah.
I mean, how many Spider-Mans and this? It's, unless you're waiting for a whole new young generation. It's nothing against the movies. It's nothing against the movie makers. But you guys are making so much money off of this that I did find it like a little worrisome. And then it was really interesting. In classes lately, occasionally I'll ask like a new class, like, I have that intro tool shop where I will ask people like, where would you rather watch a movie?
At home or in the theater?
In the theater. I will just do this generic question. 90% of the last 2 classes said at home.
Yeah.
90%. I have not been to the theater for a month and a half or 2 months, and I saw for my son Mufasa. Is that what it's called? That was I gotta be honest. That was like $90 for the 3 of us. $90, Michael. $90 for a movie that I did
for a prequel to The Lion King
that my son did
which is
not
based on Hamlet,
actually
which is probably not
really
very good.
enjoy.
Yeah.
I could have spent $25 on Apple TV to buy it.
Yeah.
And had spent $3 on food, on popcorn and whatever. That's worrisome when it comes to that.
I mean,
I also love the theater experience.
100%.
But at the same time, some of the movies that I love, like, you and I are the biggest film buffs, but some of the movies that I'm dying to see in theaters, they're not necessarily being made. They're on the TV. A lot of the stuff that I'm loving, the stuff that makes me like those, like I want to see Tootsie.
Yeah. I want to see relationship-driven things. My company is called My Therapist Thinks Productions because I want to make things that therapists will laugh at.
Oh God,
You know,
yeah.
like I want to make things that make you go, ha, ow. You know,
So when it comes to that, all of a sudden, so what are some of like I know there's no right way.
yeah,
One of them is just financing.
yeah.
So it's just getting the freaking
Look, I
money.
mean, we finance Pretty Problems because we took a mortgage out against my home. You know,
Okay.
like that's how much we were like, we're doing this.
Okay.
And I had it in my head that I had done all of my Duplass brothers research. I had really gotten into the weeds here, and I
Yeah.
was like, okay, if I can keep the budget on this thing below a certain point, I can bully enough people into buying it on Amazon and buying it on iTunes and buy it. Is it even called iTunes anymore? But I can bully people into buying this, and I will make the money back. You know,
Bookstore.
Apple Store. Thank you. They need free advertising. We should give that to them.
I'm worried about them.
God, we love our overlords at Apple too. Yeah, the look, you just said it though, the theatrical experience. I went and saw a movie. I'm a like an
Wait, but stay on target with the funding. Like, how do we get this? How do we get the money? Other than that,
you go out with your hands and you ask very politely. And I'm dealing with this for 3 projects right now.
now do you have an agent sending like for a rep as a
I
producing?
personally don't know. Some people I did for a while. It's just networks. It's just talking to people. Having an agent around these things is great, but it's also traditionally a sales agent is someone who's going to try to. This is packaging is bad days. This new kind of. I mean, this is part of the reason about building Pretty Problems was I want to have a calling card movie. I want to have something that is like I made this with no adults in the room. I made, and again, where do you get the money from? I'm dealing with this with 3 projects right now, which is, I go to some financiers and like, well, can you get actor X? And it's like, there's only one actor X and he's booked for the next 6 years. Right. And unfortunately, like we're finding this out and it bums me out. It's like female leads just are not bankable with a lot of these investors. It makes no sense to me.
What does that mean? Female leads are not bankable.
Basically, they can't guarantee a sale off. They believe that they can't guarantee a sale off of Rose Byrne was somebody we were talking about the other day, which made my jaw drop. I was like, I love Rose Byrne. I will watch Rose Byrne in anything.
She's brilliant.
She's brilliant. You know,
And they're like, no.
they're like, meh.
Ah,
And it's kind of thing where like, can we get Glenn Powell? And you're like, sure, let's call.
I mean, Glenn's a wonderful human being, but
I love his stuff. But it's a thing where
what the hell?
I dealt with this with my own project recently, where we sent it over to a name actor at UTA, and UTA pretty bluntly was just like, yeah, we're gonna read it when you show us you have the money. And we're like, right, but I've got this streaming company that tells me they'll give me the money if I get your actor. So, I think it's a Mitch Hedberg joke, but it's like if you're on the freeway and you see logs going this way and logs going this way, you're like, wait, if you need logs, then you need logs. Huh. Like, I can't get the money if I don't have the actor, but I can't get the actor if I don't have the money. And I can't get anyone to read this script until I have one of those other things. So it does, I wish I had a more like hopeful, like.
No, but it sounds to me like it's kind of like the actor experience. Like, we always say like it's a mistake if you get a job.
Yes.
Because like there's so many things working against you. It's just so many things have to line up. It's almost a mistake if you get your movie made.
Yeah. It's.
You need that one person who can somehow.
You need one, yes.
You need one person who literally has that, can somehow absorb your vision, see the importance of it being made, the value of it being made, and somehow doesn't get toxified by some of these other like worries.
Also, I think it becomes this thing of making like in quotations 4-quadrant movie.
Yeah.
Right. And it's something that's going to appeal to everybody. And I was with,
you for Pretty Problems, like had like, you already knew that you were like, I want a woman producer. I want a woman director. I want a, like you had a very idea of like, I know that I want to enter into these festivals.
Well,
I mean, I'm not saying,
it was strategic around that, certainly, but also it's a thing where I just find women to be better at doing things.
They are.
They work harder than men do. I mean, I made a movie right before Pretty Problems, and that I was an actor and became a producer on because I needed some help. And, it was a job I booked during the pandemic. I was stoked to book a job during the pandemic. And, the director and I were kind of like, people will find this movie. And I watched the opposite happen with Pretty Problems because of these amazing women I was working with who were like, we're going to make people find this movie. And it's like, it wasn't shocking to watch one of these movies kind of disappear, and the other one go on to like win festivals and get distribution and be in movie theaters.
Yeah.
You know, and I think again that's just sheer force of will, and that's surrounding yourself with people who are going to work their asses off and who are going to challenge you to work
God.
your ass off. It's like all that's to say, there is a like people want that kind of content.
Yeah.
You know, they just want to watch it at home. They don't want to. And I get that part too, man. Like I've got a really big TV and I've got a killer surround sound. You know, and like. You know, I'm a Stubbs A-list member, or whatever it is, for AMC, and so it's like I pay $20 a month and I get to see 3 movies a month. And some months I see 3, and some months I don't because there's just not enough things in theaters, and I don't care. But I saw this lovely movie, My Dead Friend Zoe, last week, which won the audience award at South by last year. Beautiful movie about people coming back from war and the trauma they're carrying around and not dealing with, and it's a comedy, but it's also like, man, it makes you cry. But also this movie has Ed Harris and Morgan Freeman in it, you know, in supporting roles. But like, and that's how, you know, they crowdfunded this movie for the most part too. And I still think crowdfunding works for people. It's just, again, there is no right way or wrong way to bake this cake. I have friends that have crowdfunded movies. I have friends that have had single investors. I would certainly always love to work with a single investor, but because it just makes it easier when the money's coming in because it's all going to one place. But it's just the target is always moving. You know, and I love what you just said, and I totally agree with you in that, like, it is just like being an actor where you cannot take it personally when the money doesn't come in one day. It's just like if you don't book a job, you don't get the feedback you want. You can't just be like, fuck that office, I'm never going back there again.
Well, I do remember, you know, one thing, I would love to do it again, but it takes so much work and time, and I don't know how it would go, but we had a film festival at the studio every year for 9 years. I don't remember, but the pandemic.
Yeah.
Got it. Although we did have that 48-hour.
We did. Yeah, I remember that.
During that. But you submitted, you won. Didn't you win? You won.
I may have won twice, but yeah,
you may have won.
going. Yeah.
You won twice.
Yeah, who's counting?
But I will say, like, a couple of people who did like that, Leah McKendrick went on to win one of those, and now she's a beast.
One of my dearest friends.
And like that festival, and like you were saying, you wrote something in class. It was empowering. Like, wait, it can be done. And one of the things was like it was one of the greatest things that you did with Brit. That what was it? It was like an
overshare. Yeah,
overshare.
Yeah, that was a.
It was like 90 seconds.
That was a 90-second in class project,
and it was brilliant. Yeah. It was brilliant and scathing.
Yeah.
It was so scathing, but it shows you what you can accomplish if you actually just fucking sit down and do it.
And that's it. You just said it. It's sitting down and fucking doing it. And, you know, I remember you told me this story very early on in our friendship about Jon Favreau bumping into somebody in a bar and this guy being like, John, like, I don't get why you're doing it. I'm just as good as you are. And John saying, because I'm doing it.
You're talking about it and I'm doing it. No, he goes, exactly. You're not that good looking.
There.
Yeah. What do you say? You're not that good looking.
You're talking about Jon Favreau, not me, right?
You're very handsome. You're not that good looking. I mean, you're not that talented. Like, I don't get it. And he's like, yeah, you're right. I'm not those things. But you're talking about it. I'm doing it.
There are a million reasons to not do this, you know. And I have to remind myself pretty often. No one put a gun to my head and made me pursue this. You know, you got into this because you wanted to. You got into this because you cared about this. Like you left your friends and family. Like there are some people who are from Los Angeles, but like you came here. And the thing with this career is it is a lottery ticket career, and you are your lottery ticket.
Yeah.
You know, and you are actually in control, though. To a certain extent, you are in control. There's chaos all around you, but it is that prepare to be lucky thing. You know, I feel I have been very fortunate. Some things have really broken my way. I have also worked my ass off, you know, and there are times where I have sacrificed. I have missed a lot of friends' weddings. I have missed out on some life events because of being on set or because of auditions or because of whatever. And there are times where I feel really silly about that, you know, where I feel like I've given up a piece of my life to pursue this thing. And then I realized that, like, I love this thing. I love it so dearly. And you know, back to what you were saying, I am scared. I am scared that stories like that are going away. I think we've got about another 30 years at least. And then I don't know what's going to happen.
Then we have no idea.
I have no idea.
I was talking to a manager friend of mine who, you know, represents a lot of big people. And she's like, Johnny, as she calls me, the best thing you can do to help your actors is obviously, help them with their acting, but also prepare them for the new world
Yeah.
that's developing, which means, we don't know what it's going to look like in 5 years, but like, get them to be creatives. Like, just make sure that they are doing stuff, that they are creating things. If you really want to be of service, prepare them for the new world where it can't just be waiting for that next opportunity.
I was putting something on tape yesterday for
And I feel like we've done a decent job
Yeah.
of doing that. But I think it's even like, how do we?
I mean, look, I've pushed you
I
that
know.
I think we can be doing more.
Yeah.
It's and again, I understand this is an acting studio, and like the focus should be on acting. At the end of the day, if you are an actor, you need to make sure that you need to make sure that instrument is going to play really well when it gets on stage.
Sure.
I was putting something on tape for a very long running procedural show, and I picked the sides, and I'm kind of like, okay, I'm the dad, and the daughters are okay, I get it. Ugh, and it's like, this is why I got into this, right?
Mhm.
That there's comfort in those shows, and I understand why people enjoy those shows, and I understand that is a moment where you are being asked to play a very specific chord. You're
Mhm.
not being asked, but I think as an actor now, I don't think a lot of actors got into this game again to play angry cop number two. I think a lot of actors got into this for whatever reason they got into it, but I think they got into it because they love storytelling, and I think it's important for people to remember what stories they love. Look, some got into it for ego, and because they watched Entourage and they thought that looks cool. But I don't think that looked cool, by the way. It's that thing of like, write what you know, and it's so cliche, but it's also like, what do you care about? What's the story you want to tell? What's the story you're passionate about? Because that shows up when you care. It shows up, and I think back to I remember watching we were talking about Avengers Endgame earlier, and I remember watching that movie, and my takeaway from leaving the theater was, I cannot believe they got all those actors in the same place on the same day.
Did they?
Like, yes.
That was pretty amazing.
And you're like, that line producer should get an Oscar.
That was,
I don't know if there was an Oscar for
my
scheduling.
thought was that I had the same
like,
thought.
someone needs to be awarded beyond monetary compensation for setting this day of shooting up. Like, because this is bonkers,
Yeah.
You can't just be an actor. I don't think you can just be an actor. Obviously, I understand there are people that are just actors, but I think if you are just getting into this thing, and look, I'm a little old for the TikTok generation. I'm a little old and we have a lot of people here that, run really healthy Instagram accounts and run really healthy TikTok accounts. But you have to have an understanding you have to understand how to write. You have to, and by the way, I think most actors do understand how to write. I think they're just scared.
But it's like Jack Nicholson said.
Yes, I was just about to say.
What he say? Like, because Matt Damon tells the story. So I'm stealing from Matt Damon. But the only reason I'm where I am is because I'm a great fucking writer.
Yeah.
But you are, if you're really a great actor, you are writing because you are filling in gaps. You are filling in blanks. You're filling in what's happening. And writing is I think the word writing makes us not sitting down and actually necessarily typing. You're writing something in your head. You're creating. You're being a creative human. So yeah, I 100% agree.
Again, it's just, and it's showing up for it. It's showing up for it every day, and it's hard. It's hard to show. We were just talking about Leah. I have so much respect for Leah because I remember Leah coming into my office in Beverly Hills, and she was like, I wrote this movie. And
you were in Beverly Hills. You need to put that in, didn't you?
Well, obviously, it's 90210, John.
Yeah.
No, I don't have that office anymore.
Not 90212.
No, the pandemic was hard on all of us in different ways, John.
Okay.
I remember Leah coming into my office, though, and being like, I've got this script and I don't know what to do. And I was like, come here, kid, let me tell you how to make a movie, And then a couple years later, I'm like, Leah, I wrote this script. I don't know what to do. And I'm like, whoa, how did this happen? And I think it was because it's very easy I just heard this saying, and I'm sure I've heard it before, but it's like, those who matter don't judge, and those who judge don't matter. So much of being a producer, so much of working in development is judging. It is. It's tearing down people's ideas, and I find that being critical. And look, like I was an acting coach. I've been an acting teacher. I think I have pretty good taste.
Mm-hmm.
And often when I'm being critical of things, it's because I just want to make them work.
Yeah.
It's not because I want to tell you why it doesn't work. Whereas I think a lot of people approach it with why doesn't it work. And I know as a writer, sometimes I will start looking at my work and going, well, that doesn't work. That was stupid. Throw it away, instead of getting into the shit and being like, what? There is an idea in here, and there is something here. If you stick with this, you will probably figure it out. But if you take the easy way out, which is just fuck it and bail, nothing's going to happen here.
Yeah.
And again, back to what I was trying to say of, you have to be a multi-hyphenate. We were talking about this class years ago, but it's like, I look at, Seth Rogen. It's like, that man does all the jobs. He does all of the jobs.
Yeah.
And like he's got a really great understanding of how these things work, and it's why he's been able to sustain his career on top of being very talented. He's very smart, and
So
he's
smart.
very practical, and he takes really strategic shots at things. And I think you also have to be really strategic. I've watched some friends try to get their own little indie darling movie up, and I've watched them not be strategic about it. You know, I've watched them not like I knew I wanted to get into South by Southwest with Pretty Problems. I
Right.
knew that was the festival that movie would pop at.
Right.
I knew that if that movie got into Sundance, I didn't think it would, but two, that it would just it wasn't saying what Sundance wants a movie to say.
That's really interesting. And I'm sure, listen, Michael, having known you a long time, I know, yeah, you do have good taste. But I think, like, I have a client that did a short film.
Yeah.
Right? They spent a lot. They did not let me read the script. I mean, not they didn't let me. They just, like, didn't ask me to. And I saw it. Cute. When I saw it, it's like, this is not going to do well.
Yeah.
It was cute, a little heartwarming, no bite.
Yeah.
For a short film, like, you got to have some surprise or bite.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of those things where I lamented, why didn't you workshop this? Why didn't you, like, let's workshop it with people? Like, you have all this talent around you. We should have workshopped it.
It's hard to some people have a hard time asking for help.
So did you, I mean, I know we workshopped the fuck out of Pretty Problem, but like, how many people do you expose to your material?
Everyone. You know,
You're not precious about it all. Just like, give it to me.
I have done so much work on self around this, man. I have a really unhealthy relationship to myself as an actor. I am so hard on myself. I kick the shit out of myself. As a writer, I don't care. I just am willing to admit that I don't know anything. I haven't taken.
Fascinating.
I haven't read a lot of the books, and I haven't read a lot of the books because I was reading all the scripts that everyone that reads the books writes, and they're all the same. They're all the same, man. I know exactly what's going to happen, you know, and so with writing, it's a thing where I'm like, I don't know, I think this is a thing, and my thing is always a note is a note, a trend is a trend. A note is someone's opinion, right? And it's okay if you read something and don't like it. But if I share it with you, and 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 you all say the same thing, I got a problem.
Right.
But if I share it with you and you're like, I don't like that character, they don't, but they love that character, and they don't. It's like, great, like, cool.
You know what's
That's your opinion.
You know what's showing you that it is a fucking miracle when something works or something, you know, good happens. I remember I was a coach on that show, This Fool.
Yeah.
Chris Estrada, one of the loveliest human beings
Yeah,
ever.
yeah.
He said that when he initially turned in the script, the studio, Hulu, I think it was Hulu. I may be getting it wrong.
Love Hulu.
But,
yeah, it's a Hulu show.
But they gave him a great note. He said it changed. It's what allowed the show to go. They said, you've written the whole season in the first episode. Just do this. Like, it should literally be turn the first 5 minutes or whatever it was. I may be getting a little wrong, but the first 5 minutes should be the whole first episode. Yeah. And then arc it from there. And he's like, so that actually made him realize, oh, I got to do all this. And then, but this was interesting. Then another show I worked on with these lovely actors, also same studio, didn't get that note.
Yeah.
And I remember working on it and thinking secretly, it feels like this is a whole season. Like, I don't know where we go from here. And guess why it didn't get picked up? Yeah. They said you did the whole season. Why was this fool fortunate enough to get that note? And why was the other show not fortunate to get that note?
Why do sometimes you hit a red light and you don't expect it to, and you get home in one piece, and sometimes you get through the red light and you get into a car
insane,
accident.
But it just shows you, it's like, wow, you want to believe there's all these like incredibly smart people who are watching, you know, kind of like taking care of the asylum.
Look,
but it's just an asylum.
I think it's so funny with Pretty Problems where we got compared to White Lotus. I didn't know White Lotus existed. We were shooting, and White Lotus came out a month after we wrapped. You know, I didn't know Triangle of Sadness existed. It came out on the exact same day we did. Like, there was something in the zeitgeist talking about rich people and their problems. There was clearly something we were all talking about, and a few of us had the idea to make projects about it. You know, I got commissioned to write a pilot by these guys, and you know, I've tried to get into the TV world a few times. It's hard. There are so many hoops to jump through with a pilot, with a television show. I mean, it's, you know, if you've got good rep and you've got connections, you can usually get your thing seen. But man, trying to make an indie pilot, Like there's a reason there's been the It's Always Sunny guys and very few people after them. You know, and obviously Lana and God, what was the name of the show?
Dun, 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 dun,
Anyway, Amy
dun,
Poehler
dun.
sees their podcast or sees
Broad City.
There we go. Cut all that out. Yeah, but it's like It's Always Sunny, Broad City. It's like there are a couple. These are like the shining, cities on a hill for this thing. But like,
And they gave them carte blanche.
right?
And at least first, It's Always Sunny.
Yeah.
Like they're like
But they
after a
also
while
shot,
they're like
they shot that pilot twice. They shot it.
yeah?
And they're like, this sucks. We need to shoot this again.
Yeah.
It's why when friends of mine want to shoot their own pilots, if you are making this because you want to show that you can direct an episode of television, fuck yeah, go for it. If you are making this because you want to sell it, I would really tell you not to spend your own money on this.
Yeah.
Because the problem is when you get this thing to executives, this is a blanket statement and it's not true, but like there is a lack of imagination, and there's what you were just talking about, which is you're giving me the whole season in one episode, right? Or there is we can tell you shot this for 10 grand and like it looks kind of cheap, and it's like, no shit, it looks kind of cheap. We shot it for 10 grand. Like we're just trying to give you a taste of what this thing looks like. You're dealing with people. It always used to break my heart when you'd be talking with other development executives, and this is years ago, but you'd be like, what if we got Jake Johnson for this part? And they'd be like, who's Jake Johnson? You'd be like, he's the lead of New Girl. And they'd be like, what's New Girl? You're like, it's like the most popular show on TV. You don't know what New Girl is? And you're like, oh, you guys are so busy, you're not watching anything.
Right.
You're just reading scripts and taking meetings. And like the reason that all of a sudden you'll come into my office and be like, we have to get actor X for this part is because there's a huge billboard of his face on the way home for you. Like you have no idea if this person is any good. They're just on a billboard, and so you think that we're supposed to hire this person. You're not, and again, I know this is not true of all executives. It's the same thing with but like they're not going to improv shows. They're not going to theater. They're not going and doing these things. Like they are only watching the things that are being crammed down their throat or the things that they are funding. Like they're listening to people who are telling them that this goes back to the foreign sales piece of getting actors for your projects, which like, I don't really know if foreign sales exists anymore, man. Like, but I'm still being told it's a thing, and I guess I have to trust them, but also I'm not sure. But it's like, what is an actor's market value? And you're being told this usually by an agent that represents the actor, and they're probably going to inflate an actor that's at their company and deflate an actor that's not at their company.
Now there's going to be tariffs on foreign sales, so.
Take that, Ryan Reynolds. Handsome bastard.
Oh, God.
Yeah, look, again, I think it's great that Chris got that note. And I think Chris is very fortunate to have gotten that note.
And he feels very fortunate.
And he should.
And I really thought, and even though that other one, what really kills me, huge director, huge producer, showrunner.
Yeah.
And I was actually feeling, even though, God, such lovely actors, but I remember I would struggle as a coach with it. They're like, why is this, like, we want the scene funnier. I'm like, there was so much freaking plot in that damn show. It's like, I go, I can make the scene funnier, but you didn't write it.
Yeah.
And then I remember the showrunner goes, you're right. That's where we left off. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it was just so much plot. And I think we have to remember, you're right. It goes back to what you said in the beginning, relationship and character. Yeah. And it had too much plot.
Yeah.
God, that's so fascinating.
Well, again, you're trying to be, there's a myth that horror movies make money. Right? There's a myth. Everyone says if you're going to make a movie, make a horror movie. You're going to make a new movie, make a horror movie, right? Yes, horror movies are most of the movies that come out. Yes, horror movies make money. There are thousands of horror movies you don't know exist. Like, it is a lie that has been peddled. And so it is and then you are, and again, like I have a lot of respect for people that make those movies. That I agree with Jordan Peele that like the difference between horror and comedy is just the release. You laugh during a comedy, during a horror movie.
I believe I'm in a horror movie that I have not watched
right now.
Yeah, no, like from years ago. Okay. Please don't watch. No, don't do. I don't want to get sued. You can watch it. I don't care. But I couldn't get through it. I couldn't watch it. I'm like, oh God.
Yeah, I started working on this thing the end of last year, and I might pick it back up, but it's a horror movie, but I'm also like,
but I will say horror films, good horror films require so much brilliance. I mean, really, there's so many. Rosemary's Baby, one of the great ones. You look at these Get Out. I mean, would you call that horror? I don't know whether you call that
I
horror.
would. But also, like I watched, I just recently watched It Follows, which I hadn't seen in a couple years, and I was just, it blows my hair back when you're like, the camera work in this movie is
Oh
bonkers,
my god.
and the way they build tension with these wide shots, and they swing it over, and then all of a sudden a room that felt this big a second ago feels this big, and you're watching craftsmen work,
Yeah.
But also I think there's a reason that you see these. Again, this is talent. This is the talent piece of this, right? This is the hard work showing up because you have the talent to pay it off. I don't know how we got into. I forgot how we got into the horror movie thing, but
Well, it's what sells.
yes,
Talking about what sells, and that there's a
I was talking.
misconception.
I was talking
Okay,
with.
go.
I was talking with some executives a couple weeks ago, and about indie movies specifically, and they were like, "We don't want to buy 4-quadrant movies as indie movies because we don't know how to sell 4-quadrant indie movies. With indie movies, we want specialized movies. We want very precise shots." Of like you know what your audience is when you're writing this, you know what your audience is when you're making it, and you're just and on it, like, frankly, you're just hoping we buy it.
Right.
But like it is, again, you have to have a plan. You have to know, Pretty Problems exceeded my expectations, but I had a plan. Like there was a very specific plan for that movie, and it felt great that it came to fruition. I've also watched friends of mine have plans and it not come to fruition. We got really, really lucky. Like we busted our asses. We made it a point to get that movie in front of people's faces. But at the end of the day, like we didn't know if it was going to play or not. And thankfully it did. We were in Austin. It was right after our last screening. And we're having, margaritas and tacos around the corner from the theater. And we're like, it went great. We're negotiating a sale of this film. The reviews are good. This woman walks by us and she's like, well, you guys were just in the movie. We're like, oh yeah. She's like, thank you. I think you just saved my marriage. And I was like, whoa. And her husband goes, what? She's like, we're going to talk in the car.
And I was like, I tell you what, man, like that's why I made this movie. Like that moment right there is why I was howling, because I really wanted to tell a story about like
relationships are hard, and it's weird how much shit we put on top of them. And at the end of the day, it's just about connecting. It is just about connecting, and I my thing is always like spoonful of sugar. It's like, I'm going to slip the message in there. I'm going to cover it in jokes, and it's going to be all this, but like there's something in there, and you brought up Adam Sandler earlier, and literally talking to his company later today about another project. And like, I love how loyal that man is.
Yeah.
I love how that man shows up for his family and his friends. I love that he's like, all right, we're making a movie in Africa, and John's directing it, and Hannah's going to write it, and Adam's going to star in it. And it's just like, that's awesome. You have built so much. You have built up so much credibility for yourself. You have built such an industry around yourself. And it's so easy in those moments to turn in and make it about how amazing you are. And instead, it's just spreading the wealth, and it's spreading around, because it's like, we can all succeed together at the end of the day.
Andre just got offered a small role in his new film.
Jeez, Eric was another guy that was in Monday. I totally forgot that.
Yeah. And Margot Qualley said yes, and the guy SNL, what's his name? Like, they make their own films, like the short films.
The Please Don't Destroy guys.
Yeah,
I love them.
But there was the three of them, and he just said he was like the kindest, most fun, awesome, extraordinary person, just like on set, and a delight.
Don't be an asshole.
Don't be an asshole. That's a good rule. I think that's where we end.
Yeah.
Don't be an asshole.
Don't be an asshole.
All right. I love you, Michael.
Love you too.
Weird handshake.
We'll do this again when Chaperones.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't wait.
starts.
Yeah.
All right.